Age of Sigmar has a lot of factions, and it can be very difficult to decide which one to play. So this video is going to help you make that choice. I'm going to cover all of the factions in this series so that you can answer the question, should I play this faction? Today we're going to be talking about the Idoneth Deepkin, who, if you were watching this video near its release date, just had a brand new battletome released with some brand new models, making this an excellent time to get into the faction. The Idoneth Deepkin are Sea Elves. They use hit and fade attacks to strike and flash at their enemies and get to safety if possible. The Idoneth are one of the more mobile factions, and they play a very delicate game of timing, waiting for the right situations and buffs to be present so they can make the most out of their forces. The plan for the video today is to break down common questions about the faction, the playstyle, the types of models, how you might get started in the army, and more. To start the video off, we're going to talk about the playstyle of the Idoneth Deepkin. The Idoneth are a small faction, so you won't have a lot of different units to choose from. That said, you will be able to lean into several different styles of army. For example, some armies will focus more on spellcasters to supplement their forces, but other Idoneth players might go light on casting. Within your unit choices, you can also lean into cavalry builds or go for lots of infantry. Idoneth also have some big models too, including the Leviathan, which is just a giant rad turtle, and the Eidolons of the Sea and Storm, which are manifestations of the countless Idoneth souls summoned in times of need. These units will hit hard, but they will cost a lot more points in your army roster. The Idoneth faction abilities have recently been revamped into a new dual track system. Basically, at the start of a battle round, you pick a buff, and each battle round you will get the next buff on that track. However, you can switch back and forth to either track starting at the beginning of each of the lists. It means that you have flexibility to react and take a beneficial buff when you need it, but to get the maximum level of a buff, you'll have to be patient and have a plan, as you'll need to wait for that track to progress to the third turn to get to that last step. I think this is a pretty cool battle trait for an army to have, and I think it will be one that will require some practice to get the most out of it. It means that games aren't always going to be exactly the same, and depending on the matchup, there's going to be some really climactic moments where your big buff activates and you have a really decisive turn. Some of these faction buffs include defensive buffs like reductions in enemy hit chances or their rend, or offensive buffs like the strike first effect, or critical hit buffs. There are also mechanical buffs that increase your mobility through running your models or via a teleport mechanic. Idoneth are not an elite faction, and that means that their models don't have the best stats around, but through the synergy of buffs, spells, and timing, they can become a sum that is much greater than their parts. Increased mobility means that you'll have an easier time evading your opponent or scoring battle tactics and objectives. You do have some sturdy units like the Leviathan, and you do have some melee-focused heroes that have your typical 3+ save, but most of the army is lightly armored, and it will be less forgiving if you overextend and expose your models to your opponent. In the new Idoneth Battletome, there are 4 battle formations that you can pick from to further customize your playstyle. The most popular formation gives +1 to hit for your companion weapons, which means your eels, your sharks, and your turtles all have a better chance to do more damage, which is awesome. But there are other options if you want to lean into an infantry build, or maybe a spell casting build, or a build that focuses on mobility and teleporting units. Those are also options that you can pick from. Next, we're going to talk about the model range and the last time it was updated. The Idoneth Deepkin are one of the smaller factions, and they don't get a ton of support, but they did just get a brand new battletome. Right now they have 12 hero models and 6 regular units. However, with this new book, we have some new heroes and a very cool manifestation called the Incarnate of the Deep. The manifestation is summoned by one of your wizards, and once it's on the battlefield, it will sprout tentacles all over the battlefield to tie up enemies and deal damage. We also have Maythala, the Oracle of the Abyss, which is a very powerful wizard that has a unique attack spell, but also, more importantly, has even more buffs for your fishy friends, allowing your companion weapons, again that's your eels, your sharks, your turtles, to attack even more. There's also a dual kit that can be built as an icon of the sea or an icon of the storm, and these heroes have okay combat profiles, but they also bring various new buffs to your Idoneth faction to power up your different allies. We should talk about the other model choices that you get in Idoneth Deepkin, but first we need to talk about the different castes in the Idoneth society. The Achalians are one of the 2 ruling castes of the Idoneth Deepkin. These are made up of the true-souled warrior elite of the enclaves and the generals who lead them. The Achalian models are going to be your badass sea elves. They include most of your hero characters like Volturnos, High King of the Deep, the Achalian King, the Thrall Master, and the new Icon of the Sea and Icon of the Storms. You also have some non-hero models like the Achalian Alopex, which is the shark, the Morsar Guard, and the Ishalan Guard, which are going to be your eels, and then you have the Leviathan, which is the big turtle. We also have the Isharan. The Isharan are going to be the second of the ruling castes in the Idoneth society, and they are organized into various fanes, which are branches that focus on distinct forms of magic, aka these are your casters. So the Isharan encompass all of your caster heroes like the Tidecaster, Lotan, the Soul Scryer, the Soul Render, and the new model Maythala, Oracle of the Abyss. Finally, we have the Namarti, which are the lowest and most numerous caste of the Idoneth Deepkin. They have withered souls, they don't have any vision, their eyes are shut, and they are not complete. They are both a blessing and a burden kept alive through the spoils of Idoneth raids, where they go and steal souls, but they are doomed to live a short and meager life compared to their elven kin. They are used by weapons as by the many Achalians, although some of them do treat them with respect, but these are your infantry chaff units, the ranged reavers and the melee-focused thralls. They don't have a lot to boast in terms of power, but they are cheaper to include in your army and are useful for a variety of strategies, most of all protecting your impact pieces from danger, but you can also go the ranged route with the reavers as they all have shooting attacks. I'm not going to go into a deep dive of the lore of the Idoneth Deepkin in this video, but if you are curious about their lore, you can consider checking out my Every Age of Sigmar faction explained in 24 minutes video for an introduction to the faction. In terms of difficulty to paint, the Idoneth Deepkin are one of the more difficult side of the factions that you can pick if you're looking for like your first faction. They have a lot of different details and trim to paint, including equipment, runes on their skin, and by the way, lots of skin to paint, which can be daunting to newer painters. The sea beasts they ride are a little bit easier to work with because of their size and the reduced detail, but overall, this can be a challenging faction to paint. But with any faction, painting can be as complex as you make it, and the Idoneth Deepkin are going to provide any painter with an incredible challenge, especially if you want to make water or undersea themed bases. Next, we're going to talk about the army size for this faction, whether it's an elite or a horde army. The Idoneth Deepkin aren't a horde army, but they aren't quite elite either because of the power level of their models. You will be painting a decent number of models, but you will also have a focus on heroes and some powerful eels and turtles to utilize as your force multipliers. A lot of the Idoneth army lists that I've seen are more focused on the Achalian side of units and generally have a Leviathan and other larger models present, like the eels to act as hammers or the Eidolons of the Sea to also act as some big force multipliers. Most lists that I've seen have run in 2 drops, although moving into the new meta, that's not necessarily going to be a staple to run a low army size anymore. We can also talk about the price of the army, and for this I did look up a number of lists online, but it is very difficult to find current lists for the Idoneth Deepkin without paying a subscription to one of the tournament websites because they are not doing super well in the meta currently, but they just came off a huge high in the meta where they were #1 or close to #1. And so in the recent past, there's a ton of army lists that we can look at. They're just not updated to be with the new book and the new meta. But either way, you're still going to be running a lot of the same things just on the basis that this faction doesn't have a lot of models. So I looked up multiple army lists and I priced them out, and the price that I got was about $800 to $1,000 Canadian, which is just about like 600 to 750 USD. So not a crazy high price for an army. There are ways to make that cheaper. For example, a lot of these lists ran Morsar Guard or the Ishalan Guard, and they also, some of them even had like little groups of the Namarti Reavers. And in that case, if you bought the new Spearhead, you would get a slight discount by buying that. And the more of them that you buy to get more eels, because it comes with 6 eels and then 10 of the Namarti and then a Achalian King. The more of those that you buy, you actually do save money. And even though you may or may not use that many kings. You're still just saving money over buying, 6 eels and 10 reavers by themselves. Next, we're going to talk about the general stats that you might see in this faction. And now I am discussing averages here, so what I say might not hold true for every specific unit in each of these groups, but it will give you a general idea of what each group of units do and what you can expect to get into in this faction. So for example, we have all of our sea beasts, the eels, the shark, the turtle. They generally hit on 4s and then wound on 2s or 3s, depending on which model it is. Now, of course, we have that battle formation, which makes them hit on 3s instead, and so that makes them pretty reliable because 3s and 2s or 3s and 3s are just going to be really good. Your standard elves are going to be hitting on 3s and wounding on 4s, and so wounding on 4s is pretty rough. That's a 50-50 chance, but the hitting on 3s is pretty good. And some heroes and special weapons are going to have better profiles, but it should be noted that there just are so many buffs in this army. You have ways of increasing the number of attacks that your models will take, the chance to hit, the chance to wound, increasing rend for your models, adding critical hit weapon skills like crit 2 hits and crit mortals, which will increase the amount of damage that you do. You can also buff the save roll of your infantry and cavalry units if they're by your haunted shipwreck terrain piece. And we also looked at a lot of other defensive buffs in the faction abilities. So this army has a ton of ways to buff and debuff, and it's going to take a very skilled player to maximize these choices in list building and during gameplay. So when we look at the defensive side of things, the heroes, as I said, they have typically, your 3+ save, but your other models are going to be a 4+ save or a 5+ save. And unless you're mitigating with some of the faction abilities, they will go down quite easily. But there are scenarios where, let's say you have some reavers that are by the haunted shipwreck, they're shooting at people, but they also have -1 to hit because of your faction ability, then they actually will be able to hold up a little bit better, but it takes all of that planning to put it all into place. I hope this video has helped you decide whether or not Idoneth Deepkin will be your first ever, or maybe just your next army that you are going to play. And Idoneth veterans, I want to know if I missed any important information that you'd want me to share with any prospective Idoneth Deepkin players. You can fire that away in the comments below, and then people can read and see everything that you have to share. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all soon enough in another video.